Welcome to part 2 of our look into the book The Evidence of God. When we last left you, we were at the statement at the end of that chapter. Because man's understanding of God as revealed in natural phenomena is as yet very limited, it is in the nature of man that his belief in God should also have a spiritual basis, a basis in faith. Belief in a personal God on the basis of faith is important to personal happiness in the lives of many men. But for the scientist who believes in God, there is an added satisfaction that comes with each new scientific discovery. For each discovery gives added meaning and significance to his concept of God. Physical Evidences of God by Paul Clarence Aber, sold by a physicist, and these his qualifications. And he states, Francis Bacon, no relation to Kevin Bacon, the actor, as far as we know, English philosopher and statesman, said more than 3 centuries ago, a little philosophy inclines man to atheism, a depth of philosophy brings him to religion. Bacon was unquestionably right. Millions upon millions of thinking, searching individuals throughout human existence have faced the following most profound questions. What superior intelligence, what enormous force governs man and the universe at large? What underlies or is beyond life and human experience? Each of the billions of persons and future generations of men, if present Earth life continues, will repeat these questions. In view of the deep and multitudinous soul searching devoted to these questions, we necessarily approach them humbly, without expectation of an answer that is in any way complete. One thing is certain, even as greatly resourceful and intelligent as man is, he has never felt complete within himself. Yes, this is always that emptiness, that void. Men of different religions, races and continents have independently and universally throughout history recognized man's severe limitations in understanding and explaining the vast universe, including the most difficult question of the role and purpose of life within it. Whether by means of intellect or spirit, the fact is that man has almost universally recognized a greater, all-encompassing intelligence and order in the universe than could possibly be conceived from chance, haphazard events involving inanimate, unguided matters. That man universally accepts the need of extrapolation beyond his own intellect is in itself strong evidence for a superior intelligence. Unequivocal acceptance of God cannot be gained through absolute scientific proof. Each person will finally forge his answer, the accord between his own life and God, from a moulding together of his knowledge of the material and the spiritual. It will come from combining his comprehension or understanding of the infinitely expansive and complicated material universe and his inner personal responsiveness to the greatly various experiences of intellect, emotion and spirit. A census of the reasons and experiences which demonstrate God to millions of intelligent persons around the world would be infinite in variety, but also overwhelming in total information. This writer states in his early scientific studies he was so enamored of human reasoning and the power of scientific methods that he felt certain that scientists could eventually explain everything in the universe, perhaps the origin of life, the derivation of the intellect, and even the meaning of everything. But as he learned more and more about everything, from atoms to galaxies, microbes to man, more and more remained unexplained. Science can go on victoriously for millennia, and details of the atom, the universe as a whole, life as a whole, life, man and mind, will still remain to be discovered. Scientists soon learn that science is limited to explaining in greater and greater detail the how of things, but neither science nor man can explain the why. Science, human reasoning alone, will never explain why there are atoms, stars, galaxies, life, all man with all his marvellous capacities. Although science can develop very plausible theories of a cataclysmic birth of the universe resulting in galaxies, stars, worlds and atoms, it cannot explain where all this matter and energy came from and why the universe is so constituted and ordered. Straight thinking, clear reasoning demand the concept of God. Is God a personal God, as many conceive him to be? From a viewpoint of science, the writer does not think of him as personal in the sense that he sits on a throne somewhere like a human king. The sacred writings in describing God and his nature made ample use of figures of speech derived from human life and human history. God, being a spiritual being, could not be described in purely spiritual terms, because man, as a dictomos, earthbound being, would not have been able to employ such terms or comprehend them or understand them. On the other hand, God in his spirituality and transcendence has moral virtues, the capacity for thought, volition and feeling, and in that sense he is an objective personal being. In fact, he is a divine prototype of which our human personalities are faint and finite copies. That is what is meant by the statement that man is the image of God. God is in no sense physical. For that reason he is beyond our human capacity to describe or explain him in a physical sense. At the same time, there are abundant physical evidences of his existence, and his works prove him to be infinite in wisdom, knowledge and power. But God being unfathomable or understandable, no one can understand the mind of God, according to Scripture. Man cannot fathom the ultimate purpose of himself or the great universe of which he, physically, is such a microscopically small and insignificant part. The one thing we all certainly realize is that man and the universe did not spring forth spontaneously from absolutely nothing. They had a beginning and there was a beginner. We also realize that the marvelous and intricate physical order of the universe follows laws not dictated by man, and that the miracle of life itself has an origin and a guidance beyond man, a divine origin and a divine guidance. Identifying Einstein's creative force by Marlon Brooks Creeder, physiologist. Qualifications: both as an ordinary human being and also as a man devoting his life to scientific study and research, this writer had no doubt at all about the existence of God. There is definitely a God, but his existence cannot be proved, nor can he in any way be analysed by laboratory methods. He is non-physical. He is a spiritual, intelligent, creative or sustaining power. But though we cannot use ordinary scientific methods in determining his existence, yet we can study the manifold evidences of his existence in man and in nature at large. These evidences to this writer's mind are clear-cut and convincing. And he asks, may he state here that many of these so-called theories or facts of science that many people assume to be true are also not proven facts. Many of them are merely indications, pointing in the direction of facts instead of established verities. It's something like a man that you see running out of the back door of your house, which you discover has been ransacked. You do not have proof that he is guilty, but evidence certainly points in that direction. A magistrate weighs the evidence before the proof of guilt is established. In addition, the scientific method is inadequate to demonstrate or prove the existence of every reality. For example, love, undeniably one of the strongest forces affecting man, can defy scientific proof or analysis. Likewise, how can beauty or the appreciation of music be proved to someone lacking appreciation? But who would deny their existence? Evidences of the existence of God, equally as strong as those often accepted as proof in many fields of rational scientific thought, can be found, even though conclusive proof for or against the existence of God may be lacking. Our first body of evidence is found in cosmology. in the existence of a universe which is governed by precise forces of nature and an orderliness which suggests an arranger or organizer. This precision is so great that the paths of planets and, more recently, the artificial satellites can be predicted in advance. This preciseness extends to the interaction of electric charges involved in chemical reactions. It allows most physical phenomena to be expressed by mathematical law and formula. Such order, according to common human experience, is a result of an ordinary mind. Chaos rather than order emerges unless a designing or controlling force is functioning. Another group of evidence lies in the realm of life and organic structure. Of special interest to the writer as a physiologist is the intricacy of design and structure of the human and animal bodies. The creation or construction of any one organ of the body is far beyond the ability of the most ingenious man, though the function of some structures can be reproduced to a very limited degree by artificial devices. Among these are the artificial lung, heart, kidney, and mechanical brain. Speaking of the brain, that possesses unbelievable abilities, yet little more is known of its physical basis than that it can initiate and conduct electric-like charges, and that some chemical changes take place. But its numerous functions, who can explain or account for them? It is responsible for coordinating all muscular activities and controls even the most basic bodily functions, such as respiration and heartbeat. It contains memory and holds thousands of mental images available for instant recall. Is there any physical explanation of the integrating and problem-solving ability of the brain, or of reason and common sense, of motivation, desire, and serenity? The appreciation of an enthusiastic quality such as beauty, the comprehension of a spiritual reality such as love, the consciousness of self, personality development are all functions of the same small mass of protoplasm. But who can explain them on a physical basis, or even at all? Among the many complexities of the body is the intricate control of the myriad chemical reaction continually taking place, some of which cannot be duplicated outside of the body. The buffer systems which neutralize the acids of digestion and of exercise maintain the optimum conditions for metabolism. Antibodies formed to fight off harmless invaders and may confer immunity. These antibodies are specific for each disease, just as the structure of the chemicals composing that protoplasm is specific for each individual. And it carries on. Lots of information there. Obviously, no one in our present intellectual state would ever have proof of the method involved in creation, but our scientific knowledge reveals so many improbabilities in the completely materialistic explanation that is more rational to accept as the prime cause a form of special creation and the influence of an outside force. Albert Einstein, in recognizing this intelligent creative force, refers to it as the illimitable superior reasoning power which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe. As stated at the outset, this writer calls this power God, and he saw it as the beginning of the cosmic road, not eternal energy or matter, not inscrutable fate, not a fortuitous conflux of primordial elements, not the great unknown, but the Lord God Almighty. And the writer did not consider his position irrational. Mortal men whose reach and ken is so extremely limited, as he has tried to point out in a very brief compass, might do well not to bank too much on the ratio, calling this rational and that irrational. In any event, here is where the writer stands, and this is his belief. Scientific Revelations which Point to a God, by George L. Davis, physicist. As knowledge increases and old superstitions come to be recognized for what they are, a more critical evaluation of the tenets of religion and theology is inevitable. The motives behind such re-evaluation may be various, but we must assume that they spring from a real desire to know the truth. We must guard against the error of confusing agnosticism and atheism. and we must recognize that he who attacks only the traditional basis for belief in a supreme being does not, because of that alone, deserve the stigma of atheist. Such a one may also believe in the existence of a God and may in fact rest that belief on a firm basis. That atheism exists in scientific circles is undeniable, but the popular belief that atheism is more prevalent among scientists than among the unscientific has never been proved and is in fact contrary to the impressions gained at first hand by many of the scientists themselves. As to this writer's own belief in a supreme being, it would be foolish to state that it is not influenced by his early teaching. We never quite escaped from religious instruction received in our formative years. Okay, so he couldn't escape from that. But he could say with certainty that his present belief, while in agreement with that which he was taught as to the existence of a God, has a firm basis which is quite distinct from that of ecclesiastical authority. As a physicist, he had the privilege of seeing something of the unbelievably complex structure of the universe, in which the internal vibrations of the smallest atom are no less wonderful than the tremendous activity of the greatest star, where every ray of light, every physical and chemical reaction, every characteristic of every living thing comes into being and runs its course in obedience to the same immutable laws. This is the picture science has unfolded, and the longer one examines it, the more intricate and beautiful it becomes. But with the marvellous revelations of scientific research have come inevitable questions, not new but brought into new perspective by clearer insight into the fabric of the universe, of which the human race is revealed as an inextricable part. One of these questions, of vital importance because of its inferences with respect to our moral responsibilities and ultimate destiny, is the old question: is there a God, a supreme being who created the universe? And with it there is a still more difficult question asked by many young children in an amazing and disconcerting flash of reasoning: if God made us, who made God? It is undeniable that there is no real scientific proof either that there is or is not a God. It is even quite possible that no strictly scientific proof ever can be formulated. We live in a physical universe that is, so far as the most penetrating research has been able to discover, perfectly consistent in its structure and its laws, but there is no reason to believe that it can give us information concerning anything outside of itself. It may well be a room without windows, or with windows transparent only to eyes that look in, not out. Since we cannot prove the existence or non-existence of a God, then the best we can do is to make intelligent inferences from what we know. Such an inference, which cannot be logically attacked on the basis of any knowledge available to us, is this: no material thing can create itself. If a universe could create itself, then it would embody in itself the powers of a creator, a God, and we should be forced to conclude that the universe itself is a God. Thus, the existence of a God would be admitted, but in the peculiar form of a God that is both supernatural and material. This writer chose to conceive of a God who has created a material universe, not identical with himself, but dominated and permeated by himself. To this the writer added a second inference: the higher the evolutionary developments to which a creation leads, the stronger the evidence of a supreme intelligence behind that creation. The evolutionary developments in our universe, so convincingly demonstrated by science, are our evidence. From a universe of elementary particles, without form and void, have come the billions of stars and perhaps greater billions of planets, definite in form, definitely describable, living out their inevitable lives under immutable laws that somehow, with an artifice probably forever beyond mortal comprehension, were built into each of the infinitesimal particles of which they were formed. This is evidence enough, but to it we must add the greatest miracle of all, that into those original exceedingly minute particles were built all the principles that were necessary to evolve not only stars and planets, planets, but myriad forms of living things as well, even creatures who can think and aspire and create intricate and lovely things. And finally, in a glorious demonstration of intellectual godlikeness, pierce into the very mysteries of life itself. Edward Fitzgerald has beautifully described the supreme miracle of creation in his immortal Rubaiyat from the great Persian astronomer. With earth's first clay they did the last man knead, and thereof the last harvest sowed the seed, and the first morning of creation wrote what the last dawn of reckoning shall read. These revelations of transcendent intelligence behind the evolution of the universe, for this writer, sufficient evidence of a God. They are sufficient evidence of a God. They are sufficient even with the inference that no material thing can create itself. Plain Water Will Tell You the Story by Thomas David Parkes, research chemist. He states, Whittaker Chambers in his book Witness tells of a simple incident which was probably the turning point of his life and perhaps of the affairs of mankind. He was watching his little daughter and unconsciously became aware of the shape of her ears. He thought to himself, how impossible that such delicate convolutions could have come about by chance. They could have been created only by premeditated design. But he pushed this thought out of his agnostic mind because he realized that the next step in logical sequence would have to be design presupposes God, a thesis he was not yet ready to accept. The writer, Thomas David Parkes, has known many scientists among his professors and fellow research workers who have had similar thoughts about observed facts in chemistry and physics, even though they have not spoken from the depths of despair that Whittaker Chambers found himself in. This writer sees order and design all about him in the inorganic world. He cannot believe that they are there by the haphazard, fortunate coming together of atoms. For him, this design demanded an intelligence, and this intelligence he called God. Probably to a chemist, the periodic arrangement of the elements is the most arresting. One of the first things a freshman chemistry student learns is the periodicity or order found in the elements. This order has been variously described and classified, but we usually credit Mendeleev, the Russian chemist of the last century, with our periodic table. Not only did this arrangement provide a means of studying the known elements and their compounds, but it also gave impetus to the search for those elements which had not yet been discovered. Their very existence was postulated by vacant spaces in the orderly arrangement of their table. Chemists today still use the periodic table to aid them in their study of reactions and to predict properties of unknown or new compounds. That they have been successful is sound testimony to the fact that beautiful order exists in the organic world. But the order we see around us is not a relentless omnipotence. It is tempered with beneficence, a testimony to the fact that good and pleasure are as much a concern of divine intelligence as the immutable laws of nature. Look around you at the exceptions and deviations that do, in fact, defy the laws of cold rationality. Take, for example, water. From its formula, weight 18, one would predict that would be a gas at ordinary temperatures and pressures. Ammonia, with a formula weight of 17, is a gas at temperatures as low as 33 degrees Celsius at atmospheric pressure. Hydrogen sulfide, closely related to water by position in the periodic table, and with a formula weight of 34, is a gas at temperatures down to minus 59 degrees Celsius. The fact that water exists as a liquid at all at ordinary temperatures is something to make one stop and think. Water has many other properties, however, which are interesting and which taken together are, to this writer, strong evidence of design. On a gross scale, it should be pointed out that water covers about 3/4 of our planet Earth, and as such exerts a tremendous influence on the temperatures and weather conditions which prevail. One can imagine catastrophic variations in temperature if water did not have a unique combination of properties. Water has a high heat of melting, a long period of liquidity, and a very high heat of vaporization. As such, it is a wonderful shock absorber to changes in temperature. In other words, without the built-in resistance to temperature which water exhibits, this earth would be much less suitable for life and much less pleasant for human activity. Wouldn't it be a dry desert and lifeless? There are other unique properties of water which appeal to this writer as having been designed by a creator who has concern for his creatures. Water is the only known substance which becomes lighter as it freezes. This is tremendously important to life. Because of it, ice floats instead of sinking to the bottom of lakes and rivers and gradually forming a solid mass. On the top of the water, it forms a layer of insulation to maintain the water below at a temperature above freezing. Fish and other marine life are preserved and the ice melts rapidly in the spring. Other very interesting properties of this common substance, water, could be pointed out. For example, it has a high surface tension which aids in plant growth by transporting nutrients through the soil. It has a high dielectric constant which makes it the best solvent known, and as such plays a vital role in the life processes of our bodies as a principal constituent of our blood. It has a high vapor pressure over a very wide range of temperature and still remains liquid throughout the whole range needed for life. Many scientists have studied these amazing properties of water and have developed theories to account for the phenomena observed. But even if we learn to understand the how of the whole subject, we still must search for an answer to the why. And water is not the only marvelous substance. There are any number of other substances which, with properties so nearly sensational that a finite human mind cannot but halt or stop and quietly genuflect in wonderment. Personally, the writer has found in his explanation of these marvels a satisfying explanation in relating nature's orders to a supreme intelligence and its design to a supreme designer, and in it all he saw more than cold, rational planning. He saw the concern and love of a creator for his creatures.